Okay, I'm gonna call to order the Lenox Public Schools School Committee meeting of January 24th, 2022.
The agenda that I sent on Thursday.
6:34.
Just log in regular and they can promote the panelists.
And the first thing will be the hearing of public comment. I don't see any hands raised. So I'm presuming there's no public comment tonight. Point. I have no correspondence. The order for the school committee meeting minutes is January 10th. I would accept a motion to approve those minutes, and because we have 3 people who are attending remotely, we'll need a roll call vote. Motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the minutes of January 10th, 2020.
Thank you.
Second.
Yes, seconds. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. Bob Munch,
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow,
Christine Morrow, aye.
Veronica Fenton,
Veronica Fenton, aye.
Warren Cass,
Warren Cass, aye.
Megan Kirby,
Megan Kirby, aye.
David Rimler,
David Rimler,
and Bob Vaughn, aye.
Mr. Vaughn or Mr. Chairman, I'm having a little trouble with the audio. I don't know if anybody other remote is having trouble hearing, but it's very difficult to hear you. All of you in the room, actually.
Bob, I had the same problem when I was on Zoom last week. I ended up, everything was sort of delayed or muffled, and I actually ended up putting on an earpiece, and that mitigated it a little bit, but it is difficult to
See, that was your experience last time, huh?
Yeah, it just seems like a little off.
It's very faint. Yeah.
And a little like
We did it, James.
fuzzy.
Okay. I can hear you. I have to strain. So.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm looking at the screen.
Same for me.
So when the red light's on, it's muted.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then anybody who wishes to speak, it might be good to take the mask off and really speak loudly. And let us know if you're having trouble hearing. Okay,
Just as a note, if I were a public listening right now, I would hope for a little better audio. So maybe we should look at doing putting the mics back on the desks or something.
yeah, if we could connect the mics somehow to the Zoom, to the,
Right. Yeah, it's something to look into because it's not great. It's
That's what I-
unsatisfactory.
Yeah, that's what I said after the last meeting.
Okay. All right.
Do we think that CTSD left us their mics?
no, I'm sure they did, yeah. We might have, and I'm not sure how they connect. Okay, we have no new business, we'll go to the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'll try to speak loudly so that the audio is as good as we can hope for here. So the superintendent's report, the first item is highlights and recognitions. And so I have quite a few to go through. The first one comes from Mr. Godfrey, the coach of the LMMHS quiz team. And I want to read a recap of some of the recent successes that the quiz team has enjoyed. So most recently, the quiz team participated in the Blender Bowl. And in the Blender Bowl, we had 12 brilliant Lenox high school students who braved the elements on the day that we were actually closed for school to make the journey out to Springfield for the Blender Bowl. And the students were excited for the competition. This is one that Lenox has won in each of the last 2 years that it was held. It was canceled last year due to COVID. This year, the tournament featured 14 teams from 9 different schools. The Blender Bowl gets its name from some of the unique quiz questions that often have students performing all sorts of mental gymnastics as they work to arrive at an answer. What makes the competition so entertaining for the students is the originality of the questions that draw on topics that are far-ranging, along with the fast, intense, fast-paced matches. So in the quiz bowl format for the Blender Bowl, each team plays 4 qualifying matches, and each match is 30 minutes in length. Following the qualifying matches, the best 4 teams are then bracketed for the playoffs. Lenox had 2 teams make the playoffs this year, with the third team finishing 5th place, just missing out. In one semifinal match, our eventual championship team went up against an undefeated Hampshire Regional squad, and our sophomore squad went up against Greens Farms Academy and surprised their opponent went up themselves as they advanced to the finals. The final was an all-Lennox affair with our sophomore team taking on our senior team. And picture below, we have a picture up on our social media that has some participants. It's Julian Harwood, Fiona Matthews, Eli Hochfelder, and Ben Hine. And then the big surprise perhaps came from the team of sophomores who competed well and made it to the finals. And that was comprised of Ian Bridges, Jason Frederick, Cormac Matthews, and Eliza Munch. And then the team that just barely missed making the playoffs was comprised of Hunter Lanning, Chris Soul, Nikki Ilya, and Max Allen. The Blender Bowl is hosted each year at Pope Francis High School. And this year, the following teams participated in the tournament: Chicopee, Frontier Regional, Gateway Regional, Greens Farms Academy, Hampshire Regional, Long Meadow, Pope Francis, and Westfield Regional. Suffice to say, the Lennox students are already looking forward to next year's Blender Bowl, and we just want to say congratulations to the quiz team on that accomplishment. Paul? Oh, the senior team won. Yeah. And it wasn't just seniors, it was seniors and one junior. And then recently, our quiz team also participated in NPM's as Schools Match Wits competition that was taped back in November, but was broadcast on January 15th. It can be found online on YouTube. I'll share the link on our social media. And it was an intense match, certainly made for great TV, and our Lenox team enjoyed a comfortable victory over a very strong Amherst team. The final tally came in at 275 for Lenox and 250 for Amherst. Our hopes are that the 275-point performance will be enough to get us a spot to the playoffs. Again, this team was made up of Eli Hochfelder, Fiona Matthews, Benjamin Heim, were terrific, both as individuals, but the coaches were even greater as a team. Once we learned of the airing date, we'll be sure to spread the news. And again, we are now aware that it's January 15th, but it also is online. And we just want to say again, great match. Our Lenox kids really shine. And just a huge ovation for the participants of the team. The quiz team coaches could not have been more impressed with the students' performance. So congratulations to our quiz team.
It was kind of nerve-wracking watching them fall 70 points behind.
Last Saturday night, was that it? Was that
Yeah.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, that it was like watching primetime network quiz show drama. I mean, they were neck and neck, they fell behind, they got a right answer, but they called it wrong. And then that lightning round, that was good TV, I thought.
But
It's a good time, and again, it's a great opportunity for the kids. Very enjoyable. So if you haven't watched it again, like I said, I'll share the link in our social media accounts so you can check it out. It's fantastic. I also want to share some of our activities from our last professional development day, which was on January 14th. Morris welcomed Jennifer Daly, a licensed clinical social worker who presented information on LGBTQIA communities and how to be good friends. She shared a wealth of resources with the staff at school, how to better support students from diverse families. And this is an event that is planned to help support the diversity, equity, and inclusion goals of the district's strategic plan. And again, the principal was very pleased with the overall presentation. She was very thankful for the staff and the way that they engage and dug into the work, and we believe that it's important for elementary students to establish a foundation of respect and understanding for all people. Students have an opportunity to learn how to become more tolerant, understanding of others, and also begin to learn more about themselves as they are people in the world as well. So these conversations hopefully will help lead our young folks to develop empathy for diverse folks that they live and play with and work alongside. And also to learn about identities that might lead to their families or even themselves. So it's never too early to set a foundation for understanding and respect. And we just thought that the presentation was very well done and our staff learned a lot. So that was the offering of Morris. And then at LMHS, staff were given 4 choices of small breakout Zoom trainings for campus. that went from noon to 1:30. And then at 1:45, they had a chance to come back together and share all what they learned. The 3 middle school math teachers worked together to correctly align the online tools that connected to Big Ideas online textbook. And the agendas for the day were created after gathering feedback from a staff survey and talking with representatives from campus who reviewed our school's usage patterns and came up with 4 workshops that they thought would be the most appropriate for the needs of folks based on what they observed and what the feedback was from the survey. So the 4 options were a Canvas studio, Google and Canvas better together, how to create modules and assignments, and then also a review of how to optimize the use of the gradebook and the speed grader functions of Canvas. Again, we got great feedback, and we always love the opportunity for staff to have voice and choice in professional learning. And so, I'm very happy to hear that our administrators at the high school, middle school, took the opportunity to gather some staff feedback from that survey before planning. Next on the superintendent report is a quick update on our therapy dog, our dogs. So both of our comfort dogs reported for their first day of work on January 18th, this past Tuesday. Each school has held a contest to name the dogs. Morris voted to name their dog Teddy, and LMHS voted to name their dog Bentley. Bentley's actually here with us in the audience tonight. And they're adorable, and they hit the ground running, literally and figuratively. And the reports back from the school so far that the dogs have already made an immediate impact, particularly with some of our most fragile students. So we're really excited about the future of this program, and we remain grateful to the school committee for supporting such a wonderful resource for the students.
Small there. Like I was expecting something much more substantial.
Oh, this is the 9 weeks. Give them a couple weeks.
So I would say just wait, because my dog was about that size when we got her, and now she's far more substantial. So almost 100% certain they can predict that they will get quite substantial also. And then lastly, on the superintendent's report from just our highlights and recognitions, we've got an action-packed week in the district this week. We have basketball games almost every single night. So if you want to check out girls and boys basketball, there's lots of opportunities this week. Wednesday is the only night that there are not games, but we also have 2 other events Wednesday evening. So Wednesday at LMHS, we have a chorus and jazz ensemble concert at 7 o'clock at the theater. And then Wednesday night, we also have a parent orientation that is jointly being hosted by the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, or CPAC, and Lenox Public Schools, along with Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, or DESI. And they're hosting an event to help orientate parents to prepare for Lenox's upcoming Special Education Civil Rights Review. These reviews happen in all districts across the Commonwealth every 3 years. And it's time now for our review, so we'll be going through that process this February. The parent orientation will be virtual via Zoom. It starts at 7 o'clock p.m. on Wednesday, January 26th, and all are welcome to join. If you have any questions, you can contact Kim Dion, the Director of Special Education Services, at 413-637-5571 with questions about the orientation. So now the next item, I'm kind of going a little bit out of order, just trying to, I think, be strategic in how we're using our time, is to submit for the board's consideration the contract for transportation services from the DO4 that would require a vote of the school committee to adopt said contract. And the contract from DO4 represents a slight increase in our busing costs spread out over a period of 5 years. So year 1, we will be looking at a 2.5% increase, the same in years 2 and 3. And then in years 4 and 5, those increases would increase to 4% in both of those years. In addition, we also have the belief that it's in our best interest to prepay for miles for athletics and field trips. That cost is at $3.60 per mile. That helps us to really contain costs as opposed to actual mileage and or wait time for the driver at the sets of events. So this has done quite a bit of legwork in terms of running numbers versus the prepaid miles versus not. Also, at every possible way to best make advantage of the increases and how to spread those out. So this was the optimal plan that positioned us to realize greater savings. And again, I think we never love to see an increase, obviously, but we're pretty pleased overall that we're able to come in at an increase that was fairly modest compared to what we've been hearing that neighbors are facing and what they're seeing in terms of bus increases. So submit that for your approval and for.
Okay, so I guess I'd accept the motion from member, either remote or in person, to accept the contract with 2-4 that Melissa has prepared.
Can I just, do we want to ask questions after the motion is moved and seconded, or do you want to ask questions first?
I wanted to have questions after it was moved and seconded.
Okay, I'll move to adopt the contract of the buses for the period, is it July 2022 to June 2027? Yeah.
I'll second it. Bob Munch.
Okay, Bob Munch seconded. Okay, is there any discussion?
So I don't know if I missed this, as I said, with a little bit of I'm hearing okay. Dr. Gosselin, so I heard in your summary, and I had the opportunity to read the document. Thank you. It's always hard to kind of key into these things, but the 4% would be in years 4 and 5, 2.5% in years 1 through 3. I think you mentioned about prepaying for athletic expenses, but did you give us what is the rationale behind the 4% for years 4 and 5?
So
Did I miss that?
Yeah, so we were all first approached with a different increase, and we went back through negotiations and looked to obviously try to secure a lower rate. And so through that discussion, we came to this graduated increase idea, which again could have either been front loaded or back loaded. And when we ran the numbers, this was the way they came out optimally. But again, even at the 4%, that's still coming in far under what we're hearing in other districts where one of our neighbors in the county was facing a 30% increase in busing. So we felt that through a multi-year contract and by spreading out the increases, this is the best way to protect the district. And the calculations that Melissa ran anticipates a savings in transportation fees of approximately $10,000 a year for the next 5 years. So again, $50,000 is going to spend on student programs and other places. So we felt we did the best job that we could to secure that contract. So again, if we find that there's major changes, there's always opportunities to maybe look back and renegotiate. But again, this came in well under what neighbors are being asked to.
So it's really just under an analysis of the benefit of the bargain without micromanaging the whole conversation. You're saying it's not tied to any specific thing. It's just the way you spread it out.
Yeah, and what's tied to is the increased cost that the Do4 is facing in terms of trying to attract and retain drivers, right? So they're seeing an increase in costs on their side. Also, like everyone else in the world, they're also experiencing inflation. So those were the major factors that led them to give us the initial figure that we thought was far too high. We talked about creative ways to maybe restructure the deal, and so this is what we came at, which again, even those 4% are still lower than the initial figure they wanted for the upfront increase, which then again compounded with costs that's far more in terms of that contract cycle.
Thank you.
My question was around the contract language itself, it said 3 to 5 years. Is it 3 years and then we have an option to extend it 2 more, or is it a 5-year contract?
So it is a 5-year contract.
Okay. So we sign it, we're committing to the whole 5-year package.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I think it said that on the cover, 3 to 5 years, and I was a little puzzled by that.
Yeah, so we started as misleading. We had asked for 2 quotes, a 3 and a 5.
Okay.
To shop for the best possible value.
I guess just one other question on it seems like a very good rate overall, just concerns me that we're backloading the increases. So that we will encounter them in the future, having not from the front, given that just a 3% every year would come out essentially the same as this. Is there, I can see a lot of advantages to just having 3% a year. Is there a benefit to structuring it this way?
So Melissa, I know we ran this many different ways. So talk about what was the advantage of doing the 2.5. We didn't talk about that, about trying to just assume 3.
So when they're looking at these contracts, the contractor is looking at the total increase over the period. So 15% would be, 15 would be the 3 to 5s, from 3s. The initial request was a lot higher than what we ended up with, but in running the various ways that we could do the percentages, the 2.5 up front actually is the lowest amount the district will pay. So 2.5 for the first 3 years and 4, it's the lowest that we would pay. If we flip-flopped it and did 4, 4, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, we actually pay a little bit more.
What about if we get 3, as you always say, what about if we get straight?
Yeah, or I guess to put a finer point on it, there's presumably some amount they want to get paid over the 5 years. It seemed to me to be in our best interest to have a smooth increase over the course of those 5 years. We could solve for exactly the amount. It looks like it would be like 2.9 something. So you could either have the exact amount or 3 and 4 of the years in a direction in the last. I just worry that if again, holding constant the total amount paid, and that's what we agreed to, I worry that if we do it this way, we're going to have 3 years when we can comfortably having cost faster elsewhere, and we're then going to get to year 4, and someone's going to say, well, why is the budget going up so fast? And the answer is going to be, well, what can you do? The bus contract is 4% this year, and there's no chance we're going to think about that for the first 3 years and save that. So realizing there are other factors, if there are other factors, then this is certainly a reasonable contract, but all things equal, and also going forward, I think what's possible, the smooth line is probably preferable.
So from year 3 to year 4, we will see 10,000, less than $10,000 increase at the 4%, with 4 buses on the road. And then from 4 to 5, it's another 10,000. And the years before, it's 6,000. So it is a little bit higher because of the higher percentage. But 2.5, I think, was a success, and it was a steal. And in order to get that, we had to give a little bit more in other years. And then when the owner said he didn't care what year he got what percentage, I played with it to see what would be the best for us. So the way that it's written is the best for us. If we did 3% each year, we actually paid $2 more per bus. Just from that calculation, based upon our current.
Any additional questions? Okay, hearing none, call for a vote. Bob Munch,
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow,
Christine Morrow, aye.
Veronica Trent,
Veronica Fenton, aye.
David Rimwood,
Abstain.
Megan Kirby,
Megan Kirby, aye.
Warren Cass,
Or pass aye.
Bob Vaughn, aye.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, now we'll move into the presentation on the fiscal year 23 preliminary budget. Share my screen so that I can.
Dr. Goslin, just to let you know, you're identified on screen as Christine Morrow.
So I'm identified on the screen as Christine Morrow.
I don't know. There's two Christine Morrows, and you're one of them.
I'm attending twice. I don't know if it was a unique link. Somehow you're on a link associated with my name. That's just a guess.
Very well, maybe. All right, well, again, I'm Dr. Goslin. I'm not Christine Morrow, although I'll try my best to emulate all the class and poise she brings to this, but again, I'm Dr. Goslin, and sorry if you see Christine Morrow twice on the screen. We'll try to work that out next meeting. Let me share my screen. Okay. So now,
Well, it knows it's your screen, Mark.
all right. So from someone at home, you just give me a thumbs up, they're able to see my screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, thank you. So here is our preliminary budget for the fiscal year 2023, which starts in July. And we'll start with the budget assumptions and terms. So as we talk about school budgets and what they hope to accomplish, we really hope to set forth a spending plan that estimates the funds that the district will need to operate. FY, the student's presentation stands for fiscal year, and that runs from July 2023. All funds must be expended, encumbered, or returned to the town within the fiscal year. And the number, or what we're really looking to achieve, is to create what we call a net budget. And the net budget is simply the projected costs minus the revenues that we expect to receive to give us our net budget. In addition to the receipts for students who are enrolled in the district, both in residency and choice, the district also receives state and federal funds to supplement specific programs. Typically, we talk about things like special education, Title I, English language development, others. So funds are appropriated to the school district from the town each year through a town meeting vote. Capital purchases and projects are not included in the operating budget. So capital would be building projects or durable goods or equipment that have a longer life. So those are treated a little bit differently in a separate budget. So our budget process works like this. So we start by developing a zero-based approach to figure out what our projected expenses are going to be. And we have a series of meetings with our principals and our department heads and program heads to go line by line and look at those expenditures, those projections very carefully. This year, and I haven't been here for cycles past, but I can speak for this year, we really try to be diligent in using the zero-based approach and not just parking money in line because it's what we've always done. Nor did we take an incremental approach and just say, we're going to raise everything by X percentage. We went through and did a 5-year look back, taking the COVID years out of the picture and tried to say, what have we historically spent in reality? And where is that in relation to the projected amounts moving forward? And if we found a discrepancy, then we revised the projection down to match as close to as reasonable the historical actual expenditures. So in doing so, we're putting forth a cleaner and tighter budget without, padding or fluff. It was really important to us to try to really put forward a lean budget that gives you real numbers rather than playing games or trying to, overestimate the six things. So then once we do that, we move into looking at the revenue side, and then we subtract those revenues against those projected expenditures. That gives us our preliminary net budget. And then the school committee entertains presentations by school principals and program leaders that offer a deeper dive into each of their unique budgets. We have a chance to learn more about some of the finer points. Then we enter into a series of deliberations and adjustments, and then we have public hearings and also input from town committees. The school committee would then vote on the total net operating budget, and then that budget would be put forward to the town meeting for the final vote. So our budget really is broken down into sections and program budgets. And the big buckets, so to speak, are these 7. So there's an elementary budget, secondary budget, special education, school services, technology, admin and support services, and operations and maintenance. And in our budget book, these will be summarized in the sections called the crosswalk. So in every budget, there are certain factors or assumptions that shape that budget. Sometimes it might be changing conditions, it may be goals and aspirations for the district or economic realities. So here are some of the factors that are shaping the budget for fiscal year 23. So we set forth some goals, and we want to continue the ongoing collaboration with the town to create responsible budgets. We also want to maintain the distinctive programs of studies that we offer with robust options for our learners. I think in many ways, the district is able to punch above its weight for a district of our size to offer an amazing array of programs for students. So we would love to be able to preserve them. Also, as we come out of COVID, it's essential to us to meet the SEL needs of students who have lived through a global pandemic and the unique challenges that brings. Furthermore, we like to continue to position Lenox as the district of choice for both students and for staff. We seek to optimize the efficiency of the district. We're always looking to improve our operations and reduce costs. We also have a goal to rise to meet the initiatives that are set forth in the strategic plan that runs for the 5-year period from 2021 through 2026. Furthermore, we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to start to devote resources to address some of the findings in the NEAS report, particularly around curriculum alignment. Some of the realities are in developing budgets. There's been a historical effort not to exceed a 3% increase year over year. The reality of creating a level services budget through a zero-based budget approach. And again, I think that's something that we really endeavor to do to a high degree this year. We also have the reality that we need to maintain a reserve for unexpected costs, such as outplacements or other unexpected costs that would, cause us to have to be able to free up money to meet some emergent needs. We also are in contract negotiations at the moment with Unit A, and then we'll also negotiate this year with Unit D as well. So one of the realities is the new costs associated with those contracts. We also have the reality that most folks are facing in every sector, and that's the fact that with a 7% increase in inflation, we're seeing a 40-year high in year-over-year costs. We also have a low level of attrition. We only have 2 retirements that are projected this year, so again, we're not going to see an outflow of teachers at the retirement side of the salary schedule. Other realities are that some of the expenditures in past budgets have been unrealized due to COVID-19. So one of the ones that stands out probably most prominently is field trips. We also have investments that we need to make to offer safe and reliable technology that supports teaching and learning. We have curriculum work that's necessary to address NEASC, as we already discussed earlier. And one of the other realities is that right now we have a cap on the number of choice students, and that cap does limit revenue that we can potentially bring into the district. So there are strategic targets that are set forth in the strategic plan, and here are some of the high-level targets. So in professional development, it's the goal of the district to increase staff influence and professional development options that meet district and staff needs. In the leadership domain, to empower staff to have more agency in pedagogical and policy decisions. And so by agency, we mean voice and choice. So we really do want to walk the walk, so to speak, when it comes to the leadership. We're also looking in the facilities domain to develop a capital project plan to support an exceptional and innovative instructional program. And technology, we're looking to provide resources that best support the district's instructional program. In the finance domain, the school committee seeks to collaborate with the town on budgets that will deliver excellent educational outcomes while acknowledging year-to-year fiscal realities. In the curriculum domain, the district will provide an inclusive, equitable, and challenging curriculum that prepares all students for their futures. In the inclusivity domain, we're looking to establish inclusive school cultures where all students matter and have voice. And in the mental health domain, we're looking to enhance the social emotional learning competencies through an inclusive instruction, integrating SEL into classroom instruction, and a renewed commitment to multi-tiered systems of support. So before we start to look at what our expenses and revenues are going to be in fiscal year 23, I want to take a few minutes just to look at, zoom out, look at how we compare to other districts across the state and across the region. So this slide here shows our spending and outcomes. And so an outcome, we're talking about test scores on the MCAS versus districts of similar wealth. And so when you look at Lenox's per pupil expenses, you can see that we are in line with a well-built pack in terms of neighboring, or not neighboring districts, but districts across the state that have similar wealth, measured in the relative district wealth, which is represented in that percentage in the third column. So that's the percentage of the wealth of the district versus the average in the state. So we're higher than average, but again, you can see our expenditures are above the middle. If you look at Berkshire County, in the per pupil expenditures versus our neighboring districts, again, we're in the middle of the pack, like up in the middle of this group, with some districts spending over $20,000 per student, behind spending $30,000 per student, and Lenox spending around $19,000 per student. So again, we're, I think, right where we'd expect us to be based on the outcomes that we get and the relative wealth of the district. So I think it's important also to kind of look at how our per pupil costs break out. And so for each student in the district, this is how the costs associated with teaching that student break out by different domains. So you can see, and it should probably be no surprise, the bulk of the costs are teachers, which is teacher salaries. And then second is the benefits and fixed costs. And so teachers' salaries and benefits, in just about every district in the nation, or in every district in the nation, represent the largest share of the pie when we're looking at what drives overall school costs. Behind that is a few others, so we have operation maintenance, pupil services, teaching services. So we look at our per pupil expenditures versus our neighbors, and particularly our teacher costs. You can see this is an area where Lenox is not at the top of the table, but we are in the upper half of the range for sure in terms of our average teacher salaries. And I think the best way to think about this is that we want to attract and retain great teachers, and it's a competitive field to do that. And so we feel that right now the way that we are positioned has allowed us to do that, as evidenced by the fact that we don't see large outflow of teachers, and that Lenox does anecdotally continually be viewed as a district of choice for teachers in the region. And again, I think that while it's anecdotal, it's also backed up by the reality that we do have a number of teachers leave other districts to come to Lenox. So we know that what we're offering our folks in terms of salary and working conditions continues to make us a desirable. There's a link here that if you click this will bring you out to a table of the teachers' salaries across the state by average salary. And so the top in the state is Provincetown, followed by Orleans. So a few districts down at the Cape that pay quite a bit in average salary costs. Average salary costs give you some benchmark, but you also have to always take that with a grain of salt, understanding that that's also heavily impacted by the age of your teachers and by the education levels of your teachers. So sometimes a district could be at the very top of these types of tables, have a wave of retirements that moves through, and all of a sudden drop down significantly in their average salaries. So it's a snapshot in time, but it is a good way to kind of benchmark. And so I've ranked these by average salary. The average across the state is $86,659. And Lenox is ranked from this number of school districts that were reported by DESE at 194 out of 318. So we're the lower half of this range, below the state average, with an average teacher salary of $79,665. When we look at filling a budget, one of the key drivers is student enrollment. And so there's a lot of research around student enrollment that school districts look at, and I'll share some of those with you tonight. So this first link takes a look at our district enrollment as of our last capture, which was on January 18th of this year. And it's divided into two tables. We have Morris at the top, and we Chess at the bottom. And then on the right-hand side, you see two columns that says strategic plan. So in the previous strategic plan, the framers of the plan set an optimal target for enrollment and a goal to be at 90% of that target. And so I've included those just to give some kind of context in terms of looking at our current enrollments and where we line up versus that 90% goal, and likewise, we would line up against an optimal goal if we were fully enrolled, the way that the framers of that previous strategic plan saw that we had room to operate at max efficiency. So again, in a lot of our grade levels, we're pretty close to that 90% mark. And if we were to allow more choice students, we could certainly meet that. We have wait lists of some grade levels so that could happen. So that's an ongoing discussion around what we want that right balance to be of residents and choice students. Every year, New England School Development Council, or NESDEC, provides us with a trove of enrollment data. So I've taken some screen captures of what they've sent along so we can see some of our historical enrollment and projected figures as well. So when you look at this slide, this looks at historical enrollment of the last decade, and we can see that Lenox is having a trend of declining enrollment, which mirrors both the county and the state in terms of declines over time. This slide is a projection of enrollment by grade level, and this forecasts from 2016 to 2026. And there's a few more slides that will clarify this further, but the overall projection is that Lenox will grow. So in some ways, this reverses some of that trend that we've seen of declining enrollments with a projected enrollment in 2026 of 727 students overall, pre-K to 12. One of the things that really stands out when you look at this is the kind of staircase cells that are highlighted, and that shows you cohorts. And one of the things that we noticed in Lenox is that we tend to, as cohorts, pick up more students over time, and that projection is slated to continue according to demographers over at Fiscal. So here's our projected enrollment moving from 2021 to a decade forward. And again, we see certainly not mercurial growth, but modest, steady growth. Putting us at 699 moving to 2031. And that's for K-12, which is why it's a little different from the previous slide, which captured pre-K. This slide contains additional data around some of the factors that drive enrollment projections. Usually the biggest drivers are live birth rates and building housing permits that are issued. And so this one captures some of the information around the new home starts that permits that we have in the books right now. Also gives us some information around where our students who don't enroll in the district are going, whether that's parochial schools, private schools, or school. We have seen a uptick over historical norms in homeschooling during COVID. So one of the things that we're looking to move forward is recapturing certainly students who chose to be homeschooled during this time frame, and or students who may not be in the district. As I alluded to earlier, the changes that we have seen in Lenox historically are in line with overall states for overall patterns for New England and for Massachusetts as well. Massachusetts has seen one of the smaller negative growth rates in the New England region, but we're still down at about 2% overall from basically a decade from 2019 to 2020. So now we've had a chance to kind of look at some of the realities. We've had to just look at what enrollment looks like at the present and moving forward. And so now we get on to the phase of creating the net budget. So as we move into thinking about the net budget, we have to think about a couple of considerations. Enrollment is one of them. And so here are some of the enrollment considerations that we're faced with. Most of our grade levels are below the target of being at 90% of that optimal enrollment level. But again, we're pretty close. So it's a target that could be attainable if we see some of those children rejoin the district, left us, and or if we were to decide to allow more choice students. Kindergarten has also been intentionally kept low due to COVID-19, the social emotional needs of students this year. So again, we probably have some space to grow our kindergarten program as well. As we saw in the earlier slides, NESDEC projects slow but modest future growth, so that was a positive. One of the things that we're faced with is the question of can we recapture those students, like I said, who live in the district but are choosing homeschooling or another option, primarily due to COVID. And another consideration would be, should we think about increasing the number of choice students to get us through until we reach that point where those projected future growth targets start to come into focus. So that could be a way to potentially generate more revenue, be a little bit bit more entrepreneurial until we reach that point where we start to level off. There's also considerations around what we call a level service budget. And so making sure that we're offering the same services year over year, one of the things we have to be concerned with is new costs that could result from the negotiations with our bargaining units, A and D, the rising cost of substitute teachers and the higher number of substitute teachers, particularly because of COVID, that inflation spike of 7%, which we talked about earlier, technology needs to support learning and district operations both safely and efficiently, an increase in staffing due to COVID, so we have to add additional positions, including additional SAC counselor that we're trying to hire, introducing building subs at each building to try to provide a little bit more coverage, and also additional custodial services to assist us with cleaning and making sure that we're sanitizing all of our surfaces. And then we also have a consideration around the curriculum work that we need to do in order to meet NEAS accreditation standards. So when we look at the fiscal year 22 current budget and the preliminary budget moving forward to next year, let's look at the expenditures by program. And so we can see that all of our programs are slated to increase. We have the small increases at the school levels, 2.64 at LMHS, 3.13 at the elementary schools. Special ed costs, we're looking at about a 7% increase. Other school services and technology costs tend to be higher in the new budget, the previous budget. Some of the main drivers for technology in particular is the hiring of a technology director, as well as investments in some new software and student information systems. In central administration, we're looking at a 5.6% increase, and operation and maintenance around a 4.5% increase. So when we look at how our expenses are represented, overall, 74% of our global expenses go to personnel and 22% go to benefits. The benefits also captures benefits for folks who are retired, but that we still provide benefits for. So that number is not necessarily just our personnel that is on staff today for the benefits piece. And the personnel piece captures all of our employees, teachers, support staff, administration, custodial services. And so schools tend to be very heavy on personnel. I mean, that's where the people business, and we employ lots of folks to do that work. And also, I think, expresses to me that we're putting money into, what we call instructional core, which is that interaction between student and teacher, which is the heart of learning. So again, this is not an unusual way to see costs divvied up, but I think that I'm pleased to see that most of it's going there and not going to other areas of an education or school budget that maybe has less direct influence on students. And we look at the projected revenues heading into next year. We see a decline in choice receipts, and that's one that I think is an area where hopefully we'll be able to mitigate that loss and smooth that out a little bit. But right now, the projection is that we're looking at about a 10% reduction in the amount of choice receipts that we get. Non-school revenues, we're looking at about a 40% or so increase, 39%. And then other revenues, an increase of around 150%. And that's largely because of a significant increase in our circuit breaker revenue. As Melissa shared a few, I don't know if it's Melissa at this point, in revenues presentation that she shared. So overall, we're looking at a revenue shortfall in the coming year versus the previous of around 3.6%. So some of those other revenues and inputs that the district receives are special ed grants, Title I dollars, Title II, Title IV. You can see the amounts for each of those. early childhood, private grants, athletics, which we've seen a significant uptick in our athletic receipts, primarily because of being relieved against some of the COVID restrictions from the previous year, as well as a capital appropriation from the town of $370,000 to use to address capital needs. So it doesn't necessarily come out of the operating budget, but it's helpful just to know that that's part of the overall picture. It's important also, I think, to note that most of these grant monies do vary year to year, and that they're intended to supplement, not supplant, local funding. So when they come in and they do the audits, they kind of ask the question, would you still be able to offer programs if it wasn't for these monies? And so we really wanted to be able to answer that. And that's it. And the cost that.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
And the monies that are given through these federal grants are really to improve and enhance, but not replace existing educational efforts. So you can't say, oh, we're going to, have a reading specialist that we wouldn't be able to have if it wasn't the title numbering. Like those are the types of things they're looking for. And then preliminary budget comparison year over year. The total for all programs, we're looking at a 4.4% increase, or a change of about $710,000. When we subtract out the receipts that we're looking at, which again is down about 3.6%, or $66,000, that leaves us with a difference in our net budget of $765,500. So going from $14,198,717 last year to $14,974,285 projected for 2023, and that represents a change of about 5.5%. So to summarize our preliminary budget, we're seeking to create a level service plan. Again, that was carefully arrived at through zero-based budgeting strategies. We're assuming that we will retain 3 sections of grades K to 5 at Morris, and maintain 2 sections of pre-K and early childhood also at Morris. Also, that the budget accounts for changes in personnel costs, including contractual obligations and retirements. So again, we put a placeholder to account for that. We seek to be able to continue all of our current initiatives and instructional programs. So we're looking to do some of the exemplary programs we already offer. And it also assumes that we will have to look at some expenses to engage in some of the curricular alignment work to meet the NEAS report findings for accreditation. And that concludes the presentation, and we'll open it up for questions.
Well, first off, thank you for the really in-depth presentation. Good stuff. Probably never looked at in this particular presentation. Looked at other reasons, but it's kind of all there together. So thanks for putting this together, and all that you've been going through with your family and all. It's a great presentation.
I had a question for Melissa just around the pie chart that showed the benefits and fixed costs. Is that all personnel cost, or are there fixed costs in there other than just for personnel? Like, specifically, I was wondering where the buses bounded.
How do I put it up?
Yeah, if you can put it on to see the total that you have here.
All right, just for the overall.
This one, I think. Well, can't see.
There we go.
It should be displaying now. Is it displaying at home?
No.
All right, let me try one time. I apologize.
There we go. Oh, I see your desktop. There we go. Yes, that one.
So what is the fixed cost total?
So the benefits and fixed cost total is 19%. Now, these numbers are also numbers that we get through DESI's site. So these are not necessarily numbers that from Melissa internally, but these are the ones that are reported to DESI. So sometimes they kind of maybe bucket things a little bit different, but so the question is, you know, what are some of the fixed costs would be tacked on to those benefits?
Well, the 19% really is what typically our benefits are amount to added to our, you know, we're right around probably 15 to 16%. So the other fixed costs I would assume might be, and
that's just also a category name, right? So in our case, maybe that is all benefits, right? But other places could also maybe have ongoing legal settlements that could be a fixed cost that they have year over year. It could be other contractual obligations that they're locked into. It could be, you know, debt service. Again, remember there's a range of ways that schools are financed. And so, again, that bin is probably meant to be a little bit more flexible, whether you're a town, school district or regional.
So this is really based on DESI.
Yeah.
DESI's breakdown by category.
Yes.
So when we see the crosswalk next week or later this week, whenever we get the budget book, online book, whatever.
I shared it with you today.
Yeah, oh,
Yes.
I
So you have
I did see that. I had email from you. The crosswalk will actually delineate more precisely what our personnel costs are versus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so you'll be able to see in the crosswalk, it's really a line item budget. So
Right.
you'll be able to see line by line and then total by area of cost within the department, within the cost center, like in Morris or the middle and high school. And then there's the total and you can see the special revenues and then the net. And the benefits are in there at 3.260 million.
Okay, so am I correct to say that pie chart is historical data, not current data?
It's probably a year. It's based on DESI stuff, and DESI stuff's always a couple of years out of.
That's what I'm thinking. So I'm just trying to get calibrated here. I assumed that chart was mapped to our current proposed budget, and I guess that's not true.
Right.
Okay,
Oh, it could be, it is mapped to this.
that's good to know.
Yep.
Melissa, a question, it relates a little bit to Bob's question, the sort of two gaps between the sort of program numbers and the totals are the benefits and then contingency. And it seems like you have a much bigger contingency in this year than we have historically. Is that based on what states read in the budgeting process or more variability that we're expecting?
So you have to take what your anticipated costs are and that you can't really put into a line item at this moment. And that's what that number encompasses.
Okay, and so what are the big things in there that wouldn't have been?
The majority are special ed costs. Typically that's half to a little bit more than the amount that's in the contingency. There's individual contracts that have to be, discussed and negotiated year to year. Part of it initially, if it's been removed, would be something like a transportation contract. Things like that you may not have a fixed cost yet on, but you're going to have some obligation in the coming year.
And so it seems like special ed is already the biggest driver of the cost increase in the budget. And then it's probably the biggest driver of what's in the contingency. And then also on the receipt side, there's the huge spike in the circuit breaker. Is that circuit breaker increase tied to the expected cost increases, or are those just two completely different funds?
So the circuit breaker receipts are received this year for expenditures last year. So we may have a completely different number next year. But the reason there's an increase in circuit breaker is because they've added in transportation. That's now able to be reimbursed at 60% or so above foundation. So that's what gave us a bigger jump. It was probably about $40,000 in that reimbursement fund.
So would we expect next year to see an even bigger circuit breaker receipt given the spikes in special ed costs this year?
Yes, if when you claim, though, it has to meet a certain threshold. So as long as some of these costs are above, which a lot of them are because of the nature of the services needed, you will see, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is, we know something may be needed in the future. The IEP may not be settled yet, but we know that there's something coming that we have to plan for as best we can with the knowledge we have at the moment.
And there's that whole special education reserve fund, which is on the town side, not on our side, is that right? And so is that something
Yes, we could access
that
that.
we could access, or how do we decide whether the jump is the kind of thing that would merit accessing it?
I think if we had a placement that occurred that was in the range of 300,000, 250 to 300,000, that would be my recommendation. You wouldn't want to budget it because we know we have that there to rely on should it occur. But that would be a case where we would most likely go to the town and say we need it.
The difficulty on that is we have to protect the anonymity of the student in a small town that sometimes is difficult and we don't. So and I believe the way it's written, the finance committee and the school committee jointly vote, or there's a discussion there with the finance committee. And obviously we have to protect the anonymity of what the student is. So it's always been, to me, it would be more than Melissa saying, we have excess expenses or we have anticipated expenses of 150,000 that somebody new is moving to town, but we never, obviously we're never going to discuss the student's name, but we got to be.
Yeah.
That she might come asking for us and the finance committee to approve money from that account, but not necessarily tie it to an event or a particular student's
Yes.
arrival.
It would just be a total of expenditures, unforeseen expenditures.
Okay, so this is, I don't know if there's more questions.
I have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Wasn't in a row, I didn't have one.
No, go ahead, because,
Sorry, two more questions. One is just on the declining receipts from Choice. Is the model still that we get $5,000 per?
Yes, you receive $5,000 minimally. So if there's additional services that are required, you could get more than that to pay for those additional services for the student, but 5,000 is the minimum, yes.
Because it seemed like, just looking at our enrollment numbers, it seemed like we've lost about 17 students, but we're losing the receipts equivalent of 35 students.
I think we looked at those numbers and I think it was down close to maybe 20, the December numbers had over 20.
Okay. Okay. And then the one other question was just with respect to ESSER money, is there anything that typically would be in any of these programs that this year we're envisioning using ESSER money for?
By programs, you mean
The 7 categories.
The 7 categories. ESSER money can be used for anything related to COVID expenses. So you'll notice the substitute lines won't increase much because I know that I can use that. And that's the reason that we have more subs at this point. Some of the school adjustment increases aren't in this budget because we have the ESSER funding. HVAC items, but I did put a lot back in that were just normal maintenance that we had taken out last year and applied to ESSER. So if anything like that came up, yes, it's not in the budget, but we could use the ESSER money.
Okay. We want to be strategic, obviously, because if we start putting too much of that into positions, when that expires, they're going to have stuck with that legacy cost, unless they want to, end the position. Which is very difficult on the front end to get someone to sign up for if they feel like this, has a high, variability or likelihood of it, will be here. So, we try to not use it for that, but if we have to, use it to offset some of the costs, we're looking at that way.
Okay. Well, thank you for the incredibly, as Bob said, I think, just a really comprehensive presentation, which it certainly helps a first timer like me get a better sense of everything that's in it. I guess just to make one observation as we keep going through the process in the weeks to come, it's obviously a significant increase, the 5.5%. And while on the one hand, there's this problem of declining receipts, on the other hand, this includes a 0% benefits increase, which means that putting receipts to the side, the cost increase on the actual programs is already 5.5%, just there. And maybe the most concerning element of that is that none of that is driven by the actual core elementary and secondary programs. Elementary and secondary are coming in combined below 3% growth. And so we've got an awful lot of cost increase that's all special education services, technology, administration, and then hard to know what exactly is in the contingency. So I think it's something that we talked about a little bit at one of our finance subcommittee meetings. But alongside the level service budget, I at least feel like it's really important to understand, okay, if we were at 3% growth, what wouldn't be in here? And therefore, what are the things that we are voting on to go further? I think they might all be incredibly important things, but I think alongside the level service stream, especially given that it's all coming from the non-core elements.
Well, I do want to say that you're seeing some of the lower increases at the school levels because a lot of the technology was pulled out. So you do see some of that. Actually, no.
No, it's controlling
yes,
for that.
yes,
Yeah, no, you're right. But yeah, that controls for that. So I do think it'll be important for us to understand better that these cost increases that are all in the, so if you put elementary and secondary to the side, the cost increase in the rest of our programs, I didn't do that, there's probably in the 7-8% range. And that's not driven by contract, by a contract. Hypothetically could be driven by inflation, but when the core program isn't growing like that, it's hard to attribute it to that.
You may see some when you get into the budget documents. You may see some notations and it's accounting movements.
Yep.
So there may be a position moved from one line number that belongs typically in elementary that was moved to student services. You'll see that, and I do have notes on the side for some of those.
Yeah.
I think the other side of that too is the scope, right? So when you're looking at numbers in the hundreds of thousands versus numbers in the millions, that there's a smoothing effect. We start to, spread it out over the millions too. So I think that's probably part of it too. And just see that, there's more swing when you're looking at, a smaller number overall. So
Any further questions? Okay, so this is, budget has gone from being the school-based and whatever to now the superintendent's presented us the budget, and you'll hear from the elementary school and administration and special ed, I think, next week. And maybe technology, I'm not sure what technology comes. And then we'll hear from secondary on February 7th. And so there'll be a lot of time, to ask questions very specifically about programs coming up. Seeing what the specifics of the proposals. So, but this is the start for us as a school. For me, this is the start of the process. And thank you for getting us to this point.
You. And all of our other administrators have helped put this together. They've done a great job in a very short period of time to turn a lot of this around. So I really appreciate their efforts.
Okay, so moving on to subcommittees.
Sorry, just we're at the end of the superintendent's report and new business and unfinished business and all of that. I just want to make a request if we could put on the agenda for the next meeting, COVID off ramp, who will be past the Omicron surge. I believe we're shifting into the new test and stay. But I guess I don't know if we are, but I know there's a question of shifting our school testing model. I believe we're certainly above 80% masking at vaccinated LMHS, probably close at this point at Morris. And so I think it would be very helpful both to know exactly where we are on those things and then have a discussion about what our plans and metrics and so forth will be from here on out.
And I'll just, add a quick comment, just for the good of the order, and that's that Jesse has offered a new testing plan, which we're really excited about. We had to opt in to reserve a place in line. So I did already opt in. And then we'll meet as a JLMC to determine if we really want to go through with it. We can always pull out, but I didn't want to lose our place. And so I just figured we had to make a quick choice on the fly. So I decided, yes, we will opt in. And then if we want to pull out, just sort of do that. But basically, the easiest way to describe it is it gives us a second round of testing weekly, but it's done at home. And then it ends the test and stay protocol. And it gives us, a little bit more flexibility moving forward. And so we're excited about the opportunity to go ahead with it. That will be my recommendation to JLMC. Obviously, there's one voice in that group, but we'll come together and talk about that. Also, with some of the new metrics that were just sent over by Trite, which also look pretty promising. So, again, then we can have that conversation certainly about off-ramps and metrics.
So moving on to various subcommittees that may have met since we last met, governance and leadership.
I don't think we've met since the last meeting.
Right. Human resources continues to meet quite regularly. Negotiations. Teaching, learning, and culture.
Hi, everybody. We met on the 12th of January, and we covered a number of subjects, which I was just looking at my minutes to remind myself. But the first thing we did, of course, was to nominate and elect a chairperson, who is me. And then we went through conversations about, I'm going to just summarize with the headings of the efforts to enable remote tutoring for quarantine students and thinking about how to help students to continue to attend in some method, while also, acknowledging that, teachers are trying to function. We're not truly in a hybrid model, but trying to keep students up to par with their schooling and their education as we move forward when they have moments that they have to quarantine. And I think that the policy that Dr. Goslin has put into place seemed to be working, with a good conversation with the LEA, et cetera. And there was some good compromise around that. We had some conversations to understand the role of the school council, some of the ways in which school council is moving forward, but that some things have gotten off track during COVID. So how are things moving forward? What's happening with meetings and initiatives? So had a conversation about that. Talked about our overall plan for DEI training. And Dr. Goslin and I have been having some conversations about contracting with an organization and then having a plan over sort of a 3-year period of time. We also talked about the website and what's happening with trying to update it and make it more user-friendly and kind of shifting a lot of what's happening on our web-based portal. So that's in process. And then we talked a little bit about the MAA policies, particularly about the new league structure, which is, I think we talked about it at our last school committee meeting. It has caused some, real problems for students who have to do a lot of travel. And so we're talking about how, what options are there. And that's going to be an ongoing conversation about how do our students enroll in high level athletics, but also balance what we all set as priorities, which is prioritizing their health and well-being, their family life, and their academics, as well as, the value and vitality of sports engagement. But when our students are traveling several hours to get to games and practice in games and competitions, we have to think about the impact. So that's, again, these are highlights of things that will be ongoing conversations about how they impact our students and our overall school culture, with impact on learning and everything that's happening. That's kind of a summary. We set our next 3 meeting dates, which will be in the minutes. And also, I think Amy already has for scheduling February 9th, March 9th, and April 6th. And we're meeting generally from 5:30 to 7. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And school building committee continues to meet. We meet about every other week. We spent about an hour at our last meeting discussing the statement of intent or interest, SOI, that we would need to submit to begin the process. The window begins actually later this week, I believe January 28th, with a submittal of April 29th. So there's a 3-month window to write the document. But what we spent most of our time talking about was whether we feel we're ready, that we would be ready to do this year, and should we do it this year, or should we be building community awareness of the issues in the building, and try to begin to educate the public and the committees, the town committees that are going to be important in supporting whatever goes forward. Now, the statement of intent of interest is really just when we say a starting point, it gets you in the door to begin to work with the Mass School Building Authority, and they come out and they begin to tell you what they feel you can and can't do. In the case of Central Berkshire, it took 15 years of submitting SOIs before anything happened. We don't have a clue what our timetable would be. Mass School Building Authority comes in and tells us when they're ready to work with us, they look at our building compared to other projects around the state and to determine, who has a greater need. And so while we may think we have a great need, it may fail in comparison to some other district. So, the question, and we'll be meeting again tomorrow night, is whether, we need to spend time building support now, or whether that's a step that comes later. Whether we go ahead and write the document, submit it, and then, see where that takes us, see how soon you hear from MSBA about if we're even in the process for the year. So when's the right time to begin building the support? Because ultimately, the document we send in has to have a very prescribed vote by both the school committee and the board of selectmen. And so there's a lot of education that needs to take place. I think we feel we can write the document, but it's a matter of whether we should be writing it this year or be waiting. I don't know if you have anything you want to say now with that kind of conversation.
No, I think you really captured it. I think the crux of what we would submit would be for some kind of project that LMHS, there are some pretty significant needs there. Some parts of the building and some of the systems and things in the building have been in their life cycle. And so, we have some cost considerations there that, we've had some ongoing repairs the last couple of years that have spent, a lot of money. So we're trying to really work through, what needs to happen there to give us the space that we need to offer students a modern educational program and support that. So that's what we're really looking at. And as Bob alluded to, there may be some work that has to be done to help folks who maybe have not been engaged with the school for a few years to understand those needs, so that they're not caught blindsided and saying, oh, I had no idea. So, I think at our next meeting, we'll really try to pin down whether we want to submit now so we can play the game of hurry up and wait, or if we think it's better to act as if, write the plan anyway, and then submit next year, but at the same time, be kind of building the community support. So I think there's merits to both paths, and they're equally as viable. So I'll have to have that conversation. But I think that's kind of where we're at. It seems like there's almost an even split in terms of what's the best path forward.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And at this point, I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn. I think our next two meetings, by the way, are actually a bit longer than this one. So just, and I think before we have that motion, Veronica had asked about, moving the March 14 meeting to perhaps March 7 or whatever.
Did I?
Correct me on your dates, Ronnie, on.
Oh, I think it was because
You're coming back from.
Yeah, I'll be back on the 28th. So I think it was was it the 28th? To move it to the 7th. And then at the 7th, yeah, I was recognizing that I do have a bridge board meeting, but I'm going to have to try to work around that.
The 28th, but not the 14th back to the 7th. Yeah, okay.
It was the 28th because that's my travel day to come back.
Yeah.
And I know now with negotiations on Tuesdays and some other meetings, it's trickier. So I'll work with Bridge about maybe starting our meeting a little bit earlier and then joining y'all.
Okay.
So if we move from the 28th to the 7th, then I think that would probably, hopefully accommodate everybody, if that's okay.
They're the 7th through the 10th.
Right, the 28th to the 7th, yeah.
Yeah, we'll look for a date that works because it's really good if all 7 of us can be around for. That'll be a discussion of the. We will have all our presentations. That'll be an important discussion. So I'll ask if Amy could send something out to see if there's some dates that could work.
Yeah, the other thought was if we took some meetings, just kind of bump them up a little bit. But again, I know the negotiations and timing for the hearing and the vote on the budget are sensitive, but I also think we built in to kind of finish our work in theory well in advance of the town timelines, which I know are important because the warrant has to be created and we have to be prepared for town meeting. So I think that was the discussion too.
Is there any way to allow people to Zoom in on Zoom tonight? Or is that a non-starter for folks?
No, we did.
I kind of assume that's what we would do, but.
Yeah. But I mean, would you be able to zoom in on the 7th? Or are you?
Yeah, I could try.
Well,
I really think we should avoid that. It's not a good way to run a meeting.
Yeah,
I'd rather have us.
And I just think it's a norm for the committee. If someone can't be at a meeting, they can't be at a meeting. But I don't think I appreciate there are a lot of other things going on at this moment that forces us to adjust. But for putting global crises aside, I think I at least would be in favor of maintaining a norm that we really need the group in the room.
Okay, that said, we'll search for a date that works, for everybody, and avoids having to do it via Zoom unless there are medical reasons to do so. So now I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Okay, this has to be a roll call vote. Warren Cass.
Warren Cass, aye.
Megan Kirby.
Megan Kirby, aye.
David Rimler.
David Rimler, aye.
Bob Munch.
Bob Munch, aye.
Christine Morrow.
Christine Morrow, aye.
Veronica Fenton.
Veronica Fenton, aye. And thank you for all the presentations.
Thank you. We are adjourned.